I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar series of the Cybersecurity and Information Systems Information Analysis Center, CSIAC. Today's presentation is entitled U.S. Air Force Software Assurance Training Approach. My name is Steve Warzala. I'm the CSIAC Outreach Manager. A few administrative notes before we begin. First, all phones have been muted except for the presenters. Questions may be asked at any time during the presentation by utilizing the chat function, and time permitting, your questions will be answered at the end of the session. Today's briefing slides will be posted on our website within a couple of days. And finally, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, the Defense Technical Information Center, DTIC. The funding that DTIC provides enables CSIAC to conduct these webinars. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Mr. Kurt Jarvis. Kurt is currently a member of the U.S. Air Force 76th Software Engineering Group. He has worked in the private sector as a DoD contractor, as well as a government civilian. Kurt started his career decades ago as a system administrator. He began without a degree, became a degreed computer programmer, and eventually a cyber-focused technical director. Mr. Jarvis has been a government civilian in both the Army and the Air Force, which provides him with a unique experience in the cross-cutting cultures. He's also been in the Army National Guard for over 20 years and deploying across the globe multiple times. Kurt has a master's degree in computer science, along with numerous technical certifications. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Jarvis. Good afternoon, Kurt. The floor is now yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad y'all could make it and join us for this endeavor. So we decided to discuss amongst the community a few months ago on how each of the DoD components was really trying to get after software assurance. From the Air Force approach, we only have a few organic software factories and software engineering groups inside of the Air Force. So even though the Air Force has a software, the community is actually kind of small. So as such, between us, where I work at, as well as the other software depot sites, we put together this training approach package to let others know how we're trying to get after this complicated problem. So here's the slides, and this is our approach. Again, we haven't solved world hunger. We haven't made any large breakthroughs. What we did is we just looked at where our problem is and went ahead and attacked it vigorously so that we actually get after the problem here, and that is software assurance to our developers, software assurance into our IT professionals, and software assurance into every component that we're doing to make sure that when we deliver a product, we're delivering that assured product. So glad you could join me here on this little adventure. And so I'll go ahead and go to the first slide and just set the stage on where we start. So when we get a new employee inside of our organization, we expect them to either be a degreed entry or a certificate entry. And so when we hire somebody else, they're usually either ABET engineers, which is that accreditation board for engineering and technology. So if you get an electrical engineering degree or a mechanical engineering degree or any of those degrees, they usually have an ABET certification. If not, there's other OPM defined, or Office of Personnel Management, that defines what a computer science degree needs to look like. There's a certain amount of hours of math, certain amount of hours of actual computer science depth, and those are kind of defined by the Office of Personnel Management for DoD. So based on what the OPM provides us as a baseline, that's usually what we have to use. And granted, these folks with these degree entries, again, they're 4-year degrees, usually between 120 and 130 hours of credits. in order to get that degree from our common four-year universities. And in that 4 years, they have to do so much. They teach a whole lot of stuff on the basics. They teach a whole lot of stuff about different components of engineering, or the different layers of computer science, whether it be hardware, software, whatever. But they don't teach software assurance. So when we acquire things, usually what we get is we get somebody who's either has an ABET accredited degree or a computer science degree, and they probably learn one language, and they probably understand the semantics so they can adopt other languages. Whether right now the popular thing is to teach Java, it used to be Pascal or whole more than that, but they kind of use at least one language that they've used throughout that career, or excuse me, throughout that degree. Whether that could also be C#, whatever that university decides to use. But we also need them the ability to do that self-discovery and leverage the internet, because that's, again, our big leverage on where to go find things at. So we expect these engineers to have that one language and the ability to go find the other things. And sometimes we call that Google foo, the ability to use Google and go find, what is it that I'm missing from my small set of knowledge that I need to expand on. And then those degree folks probably also have some sort of IDE familiarity, whether they did it inside of Eclipse, they use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, they use IntelliJ or whatever IDE they had. They probably used at least one thing throughout that career. That's what those folks bring to the table. The other side of the folks is those certificate entry folks, and that's where we're talking about our information technology field. So when I get some folks who just have these certifications, they went to maybe a VOTEC school, they went and took some certifications that go either through CompTIA or ISC Squared or some of the other, ISACA, EC Council, some of those certificate generating items, we've got to make sure that we have those folks as well. And based on what that certificate is, depends on what kind of knowledge they have to come in the organization. So again, if you're coming in with just a certificate, that's probably going to be some sort of entry level, maybe journeyman entry. And then our degree folks, again, usually come in with little experience as far as work experience, but come with that foundational knowledge that they gained from whatever degree program that they've arrived from. So let's go to the next slide. We know we're going to get some gaps, and we try to hire the folks that have the right industry talents for the right software application. But DoD is a niche. We don't have a lot of folks who come out of college understanding how an avionics bus works. We don't have a whole lot of folks that know how to maneuver a spacecraft as it's floating through a geosynchronous orbit. So we have to build those skills, and if you understand what skills are missing whenever you get them, whenever you get these new employees, it's way easier to understand how to get them the right training plan and get them the right knowledge to get there. So as we get these folks, whether it be the certificate entry folks or whether it be the folks from that degree university, we know that they've not seen some of these. So one of those is industry tools. We know that they probably use some open source or something off of GitHub or a common tool as part of the ecosystem they had in their college degree, but they haven't really used the large scale tools. They haven't used the ones that we probably pay a pretty penny for at some times to make those available to use within our areas. They probably don't understand software assurance yet. Most folks, whenever they're getting to their degree, the objective is to make the program work. And as long as it works, they probably get a pretty decent grade for that. Now, are there holes in there? Are there cybersecurity issues that go with that project? Probably. But most of those don't have time within the 4-year degree cycle or within that certificate in VOTEC area to get into the software assurance piece on, is it going to last a long time? Whenever I design something for one of our aircraft, I expect it to fly for at least a decade. Most of our aircraft that we have around today within the Air Force have been around a while. And the ones that we just acquired, let's say KC-46, those are going to be around for 20, 30, 50 years. So the code that we write and half of that has to have that longevity. So we got to make sure that we write it right. We write it in a way that we can actually evaluate it, and that's where that software assurance comes in. And then again, just like functional versus secure, I have to have a way to make sure that not only meets the functional requirement of doing what it's supposed to do, but it's got to do it in a secure way. So I can read things and I can do things in many different ways to get to the end state. Sometimes we focus on the functional requirements, but now I've got this longevity I got to have. With us in the DoD, we have some interesting adversaries out there who want to thwart our activities, and whether that be anybody outside the U.S. or those folks that are just those script kiddies out there trying to see what all that they can do. We have to defend against all of it, so we got to make sure our stuff is secure. And we know that with the folks that come in organizations just don't have that foundation yet. The next thing is certifications. A lot of our degree folks will come in with hey, I have this degree in this area, but they might not have the specialties that we're looking for. So when I develop something specifically for an aircraft, let's say it's going to be on a certain bus, and by bus, we have different communication mechanisms. Most of our degree programs talk about TCP/IP or the internet layer to be moving traffic around. That's not quite the way we communicate across all of our other aircraft we have out there today or our ground systems. So those unique items have to then be educated. We got to train them up in that area. And we got to be able to get those folks to understand the ins and outs of how those things can communicate, and those comes with those certifications. And the last thing there at the top of the pyramid is the tool chain that we use. So whenever you're coming through your degree program or you're coming through your certification path, whenever we develop something, we develop it locally. We do it ourselves. We have our own little files on our system. We might run some internal assessments through something like Microsoft's built-in code analytics. If you've got Visual Studio, you can go ahead and hit Run Analytics. It'll give you a little bit of feedback on how good your code was written. The compiler will give you a little bit of feedback on when you forgot semicolons or some things that just don't quite look right. But what we haven't done is done this on a large scale where I run it through the different stages and different quality gates before we actually put something that's going to go out there on an aircraft. That can be airworthiness. That can be something as simple as static analysis. That can be something as complex as some of the dynamic analysis and fuzzing that we do to make sure that the input that's coming into the program is going to function the way it's intended, regardless of what kind of input it gets. So again, we got to build that expertise. We know that's a skill gap, and we've got to account for that as it moves forward. So of course, in the DoD, we have a thing called legacy. Because again, we have lots of new technology out there. People are adopting the latest and greatest out there in the what I would call the civilian world. But inside of DoD, we've got to maintain some things that have been around a while. And some folks will say that, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. However, everything we have, we want to add things to it. So that same code that was written in Fortran a couple decades ago still functions, and it still does what it was designed to do on the hardware it was designed to do it on. Now, I don't want to replace all that because it's a whole lot. We don't have enough money in the Department of Defense budget to upgrade everything all the time. So we've got to stay with what we've got. And as we do that, I want to add some functionality. I got to add some things to that. So I got to deal with those older little languages that some folks never even heard of before. So us older folks have probably coded in some things like Ada, Fortran, some of those older ones, and some folks, they even skip that. That might be part of their history class, as part of their computer science degree, but then they miss it because, again, they move on to the newer things like Ruby and Node.js and Kubernetes and all the new buzzwords going on now with the new technology that we're layering on. So within the DoD, we've got to account for that. I've got to account for hardware in the loop. A lot of our abstraction nowadays is I just write my software regardless of what hardware it runs. Well, you pay a penalty for that because you don't actually get the embedded and the fast performance that you would get from a hardware-specific code. And because I'm able to do that, we've got to account for that. and especially the non-TCP IP, because that is the trend today. We all understand the 7 layers of the OSI model, and that's great. But a lot of our legacy equipment, our late stuff in the Air Force, might not use that model. So we have different bus schemes. We have different ways of communicating with some of these avionics and ground systems that we have to account for. So if I go ahead and go on the next slide, and this is our approach to getting there. We know where they're starting. We know what gaps they have. So here's our approach to get them where they need to go. So we start with onboarding. Hey, we've got a new employee. Hey, regardless of what your background is, we want to level set you with where we're at within the Air Force. Here's what our workload looks like. Here's the project that we're going to support. And then here's what we need you to focus on. So once we get that in, then we have the on-the-job training. So the on-the-job training is, okay, now I've been assigned an awesome spot. I'm going to work on this specific workload X. And now what are the intricacies of that workload? Because a space platform is way different than a aircraft platform, which is different than something that is a weapon system, which might be different than a ground system. So depending on what it is we got those specific job trainings that we need to get after that. And then the third thing there is certifications. Again, just because you've got your degree, now we're going to level you up, so to say, okay, he's got this degree or he's got this certification that got him in the door. We're going to give this person an additional set of skills. And then once those additional set of skills are in, they're running to get you that certification to move you to that next level to make sure that you've got the well-rounded foundation to help us with the Air Force and Department of Defense's mission. And then the last thing I got here is just those training plans. What are we going to do to get you there over a certain block of time? So let's dive into onboarding so we can get everybody up to speed. So when we do our onboarding, of course, SWEG is the software engineering group, and that's where that acronym comes from. So every employee that we get inside of the SWEG or within our organization, we go ahead and do an initial software assurance training. We know that the folks that came in probably didn't have any sort of exposure to software assurance, other than maybe run some of those built-in tools that were inside of that development environment through college, or it might have been a key topic on your CEH exam, your certified ethical hacker, or possibly referenced in your Security Plus or whatever type of entry-level certification that you got. So because we know those don't exist, we had to go ahead and make it ourselves. It just wasn't out there, so we developed it in-house. And we did that, so we started with, hey, what is software assurance? And when I say the word software assurance, most folks can just get an idea in their head of what that means. Well, DoD actually defined it for us because DoD is embedded inside of public law, which told us we have to make sure we account for software assurance. So we've got the whys in there on why we're doing this effort. Why are we adding these extra steps in when functionally the code works? But I've got to add the software assurance steps in. So if I tell the folks why we're doing it, it helps them understand and give them the importance of actually executing it. And then we talk about the cyber kill chains. So it doesn't really matter which one you go grab. I know Lockheed Martin, I've seen theirs. I've seen the one out of FireEye. They all are really close to being the same. The idea, though, is, I do an initial recon. I see what's out there. I establish myself a foothold, and then I escalate some privileges. And once I escalate privileges, I figure out where I need to go next as the attacker. And then as I'm moving around, I'm gathering more information, and planting things or disrupting things if I need to. And then I get to where the adversary was trying to go, and that's what we call actions on objectives. And that's where the adversary or whoever's trying to get into the software is doing their damage or whatever they wanted. Whether that they want to do some crypto mining, or somebody just wants to prove they can do it, or some of the more malicious stuff that happens with some of our near-peer adversaries. So after we talk to that kill chain, we talk about software architecture and threat modeling. We've realized that's one of the pieces missing for most of our folks that come in from these degree programs. They don't really talk about software architecture and how to design everything to work together. So within the Department of Defense, we have lots of things called system of systems. And that system of system concept is I've got all these components that do these things that have to work together. And as the larger the system is, the more systems I have to integrate together. So the one change you make inside of your small piece could have a drastic and big impact to everything else as part of that system. So understanding the architecture and how to do that is very, very important for us. And the second thing is threat modeling. So we've got to understand what the threat is and how that threat is going to attack us. So the common thing out there right now is that OWASP top 10. I think OWASP puts those a new list out about every other year, gives them a small update on what it is that the new threats are for the online web applications. So just like them, we have new and different threats that come out all the time against the U.S. Air Force. Some of them are very minuscule. Some of those are for more malicious purposes. But either way, we need to understand what those threats are and how they're going to attack. If I know how they're going to attack, I know how to defend that inside of our code. And then we talk about the things that kind of get skipped through those degree programs and those certification entries is, how do I move myself through the pipeline? So once I actually get this thing to function and work, I need to make sure that I've got some unit testing and that's automated. We don't have the luxury to run them manually all the time because my code just grows. 10 years of code on a platform or a system gets massive. That could be in millions of lines of code. So we've got to have a way to automate that. So I've got to have that testing harness to do that. I've got to do static and dynamic analysis, and I got to do some sort of fuzzing. That fuzzing can be within your dynamic. That fuzzing can be inside your static. That fuzzing can just be its own individual standalone step, depending on what kind of application you got. But those things have to happen, and those kind of get skipped. So this is that foundation to lay that out there. So within our organization, we do have a process for software assurance that's included into everything that we deliver. So when we deliver a product to the aircraft or to the ground system or to the satellite or wherever, we have a process, and in that process, we have these software assurance steps. So we are training our employees when they come in, hey, these are the type of things that you're going to do as you develop or produce the software that you're going to do. And then the last thing we cover is the top 6 CWEs for the SWEG. So what are those common weakness enumerations that we find from our static and dynamic testing that's common to us? So they don't always line up with the OWASP top 10. Because of what we do, we don't do a lot of web apps. We do a lot of things for the actual aircraft and the onboard systems. And because of that, our CWEs are not quite the same that OS that kicks out. So what we do is we say, over the last year, here's the trend that we've seen within our SWEG, or within our engineering group, that we've actually had. So because of that, I'm letting the folks know, hey, here's the things that you need to probably clean up inside of your coding practices, because these are things that we're finding within our engineering group that we've got to go address. So it might not, there might not any of them be on the OWASP top 10. They might all be. It all depends on what application that the employee is going to go work for. But that's our onboarding process. And that kind of level sets everybody and gets everybody understanding where we're at today, what we need to go build on. So with that, we go from that onboarding process to, okay, I understand what I should do. Now, what else is out there? Well, the other thing that's out there currently is CLE 081, which is some acquisition training that focuses on software assurance. But that training's at the DoD level, and while that training is good, it's very broad. It kind of gives you the broad overview across DoD. And if you think, is software assurance the same on an airplane as it is on a tank, as it is on a data center? You're like, well, they're not quite all equal there. So the way it works for us is we got to look at the mission, we look at the system, what language, and the architecture. And that gives you your unique combination you're going to use to understand what software assurance means for the pipeline that you're supporting. All pipelines aren't created equal. All products aren't created equal. And almost all of our projects were delivered or produced in a different time span. So whether that be something from the 1970s, something from the 1980s, something from the 2000s, whatever year it was delivered to the Air Force and we started using it, that is probably at a different state as it moves through. So I have a little caption there on the right. The little image is a snapshot what all the CNCF projects currently are today. And that CNCF is those cloud native computing foundation that says as we embrace some of these things like Kubernetes and microservices, here's the things that are going to be compliant in all those layers. So if I was going to design something today, I would just need to pick one of the smorgasbord from each category that I would use to make my pipeline. So if I was going to make a web app using, let's say, Java, it might have a slightly different pipeline than a web app for C#. Conversely, if I'm going to make a non-web app or an executable that's going to run on a specific set of hardware, it will probably have a totally different pipeline. And because of that, each of those pipelines has some intricacies to understand on how those work. So it's good to have common tools, but when you don't have common applications or common hardware, it's hard to have these common pipelines. So within the SWEG, both at Hill, Robbins, and Tinker Air Force Base, we have lots of unique pipelines because of our unique mission sets that we have. So our intent with onboarding is to give them an intro to here's what software assurance is and here's what it means to us and why it's important. So once we get them through that initial training, they're then going to go to the career field or the career specialty that they have for the job that we actually hired them for. So whether that be working on a bomber, working on a fighter jet, working on a ground system, working on a satellite dish, working wherever, they're going to need some unique on-the-job trainings for what it is that they're doing. So the first thing that we do is we do some refresher training. And we do that for the SWEG as a whole. So for our engineering group, we update them every year on here's the new things that are out that have affected us. Here's the new top 6 SWEs or common weaknesses that we found through static analysis that we probably need to go shore up and fix. And then we actually provide them with hey, here's the new updates to policy or the new updates to a technical implementation guidance from the Department of Information Services or whatever new things came out that year. That's our ability to say, hey, here's what's new and make sure everybody gets it. And we do that through computer-based training or CBT. So we usually use some sort of PowerPoint with some voice narration and provide that to the user on demand at their desk. So once we provide that, then we have some options on where to go get some courses. So for the SWEG, the engineering groups, we've invested in a platform called Pluralsight, which gives a lot of IT and developer-related courses that are almost all self-guided through video with some labs and some hands-on experience that you can get through each of these courses. So the idea here is to have those small, consumable bits of knowledge that somebody can go get in 30 minutes or less. Most of the Pluralsight courses are less than 10 to 15 minutes. If they need to be longer than that, they're divided up into modules. That way you can get those short snippets of what you're looking for. So I don't really need a whole semester course in a college, 16 weeks of a topic. Most of our engineers, developers, computer scientists just need to have that one little tidbit for them to expand their knowledge and then go do some Google foo to go get what pieces it are that they're missing. So Pluralsight's been a great addition for us to do that on-the-job training. I know some other organizations use IT Pro, and that is really designed for our TCP/IP cybersecurity area. And Pluralsight was a little bit better for us for the content to be for our developers and engineers, which is what we're aiming the training to go solve. So that's why we chose that over the other ones. The other ones are great as well. This is just what we settled in on, and it's been working for us. So inside of the government, we also have Cyber.mil and FedVTE. Both of those are ran by outside the Air Force, so we're leveraging both DoD and DISA for those. And again, they've got the courses on there that could be specific for what we're looking for. I know right now that's where they hold like a Hacker 101, which is another good intro course for folks that don't quite understand or get the concept of, who would be attacking my system. FedVTE, again, if I want to go study for a certification, they've got some stuff on there. If I want to go learn more about how HVSS or the host-based intrusion detection system works within DoD. They've got some tools on that. So FedDET is that good free resource that gets provided out there. We leverage that a lot. I also got to understand this tool chain. So we understand that when folks come in, they probably never used a tool chain before. So we've got some in-house training that we do with that. We've tried to use wikis as our main source of knowledge sharing. So we've got a wiki for Coverity. We've got a wiki for Fortify. So depending on what tool chain you're using, we might have a wiki out there for you. And so we use that, and then the vendors that we purchase some of these commercial tools from also provide us a good set of training. So that gives us the ability to train those folks up on that, because we need that, because those tools help us get rid of those manual reviews, let the engineer and developer focus on where those CWBs are located at to actually fix the problem. No matter what type of methodology you use, whether it be some of the agile methodologies of extreme programming, paired programming, or any of those, you still got to have some time in there to triage what the findings are, and have another peer, actually review your code and look at it. So we've got to train folks up on how to do that. A lot of folks don't really want to tell somebody else that, hey, I think there's a problem here. Depending on whether you're an introvert or extrovert or what your personality is, sometimes those pairings can be a little hard. So again, we got to train folks up on how to do a good peer review, how to triage things to say, is this a problem, or how do I mitigate this thing? Can I mitigate it through a technical control? Can I mitigate it through a procedural control? Can I mitigate it through an admin control? Or do I just need to go back and fix the code and re-architect? Those are all valid options based on what the error is or what the weakness is. We got to train up our folks to do that. So in addition to doing things internally, there's lots of opportunities for us to go externally. So we try to leverage as many local conferences as possible. So depending on where you're at, whether you're at the what we call the Silicon Slopes out there in Utah, or you're over there in Georgia, next to close to Georgia Tech, or you're in Oklahoma City, one of our innovation hubs. We have some conferences that come in, and we try to send as much folks as possible to go participate in. Those conferences, again, how do I take up somebody who has a passion for some topic and link them up with somebody else in the community? That way they have that network built. How do I build a network for who do I reach out to and ask questions for, and then be able to help somebody else? It's not just about taking, it's about giving as well. So those conferences help set those linkages up. So I know we just did B-Sides last year in Oklahoma. I'm sure we'll do B-Sides here again. There's lots of great conferences that come around and around. Some more opportunities that we have within our SWEG is we send it and embed folks to go out there and sit with other folks who are doing a similar or the same task, and make sure we can cross-pollinate and learn what it is they're doing. So the Air Force Research Lab, they do what they call cyber blue books. That's where they go out and evaluate a system to see what the architecture looks like. They do a deep dive into what the code looks like, how they do their process. So we actually volunteer and send some folks on those trips to, one, gain knowledge, and two, to share knowledge and give some insight back to the other team members on that cyber blue book to have those great discussions on why we're doing coding a certain way, why something's being architected in a certain way, or all those great questions that come up that we can get some knowledge there in the room for a development perspective. We have the CROWs as well, the Cyber Resiliency Office for Weapons Systems. We've embedded a few folks in there. We have DIU, which is, back when we started, it was DIUX because it was experimental. We went and embedded some folks in there for about 6 months. I believe they worked out of Boston up there for DIUX in Kessel Run. And they were actually embedded there for 6 months, worked on a Scrum team, worked inside the development and program management team, and actually understood and got a way to get some in-depth on how somebody else was doing DevSecOps. And then we brought that good knowledge back to us, helped make our products, our policies, and our procedures better. And that's how we get some folks some on-the-job training. We invest in our folks to go do some of those great things. Right now, we got some folks embedded with what they're calling Platform One. which is the U.S. Air Force's arm right now for some innovation for the new pipelines that are going to be coming out for the Air Force. So we sent some folks up there as well, right there in Colorado Springs. Again, another great opportunity for us to embed some folks with some of that cutting edge technology and then bring that knowledge and skill set back to our organization and spread the wealth. Within Oklahoma, we also have some lunch and learn opportunities. So whether that be some local organizations like AFCEA or the irregulars or the small little InfraGard or B-sides groups, we have some lunch and learn opportunities that we have off base with some organizations. And then we also do some ones on base. So at least once a month, there's some sort of event happening on base, whether it be through either a local group or just one of the folks who just want to share on topic saying, hey, I learned something about topic X. I'd like to share it with folks. Everybody bring their lunch, and we'll do a sharing on that. And we also have the opportunity to embed with our customers and partners. So we have a lot of examples today to where we have a contractor that's going to deliver the Air Force an awesome capability, just like we did with the KC-46. With that, we have the opportunity to take some of our folks who are going to work that project later and embed it with them a little early at the contractor site or with that partnering site in order for them to actually get an in-depth understanding of how they're going to deliver and how they did the development before it becomes organically sustained by the Air Force. So again, another great option there. So the next thing here on the topic is those certifications. That can be a really tough topic depending on who's buying and how much they cost. So DoD came out with a baseline. So it's called, inside of the 8570, it's called their baseline certification. And whether you're an information assurance technician, an information assurance manager, or an information assurance science and software architect and engineer, they have different requirements for you as a minimum baseline for DoD. Those can get pricey. They do have an annual cost, and it is a requirement for folks to maintain some of these positions. So if we're going to have you as an employee be our system administrator for a Windows environment, we would want you to have that information assurance technology baseline minimum standard by DoD, as well as a certificate from the computing environment. So we want our Windows folks to have a cert from Microsoft, our Red Hat folks to have a cert from Red Hat, our Cisco folks to have a cert from Cisco. That way we know that those are the folks that have the knowledge, they've been appropriately trained in the ins and outs of that computing environment to make sure that we have that certification. That same stuff goes for the cloud environment. So if I'm going to have an Azure administrator or an AWS administrator, I got to get them those certifications as well to make sure that we've got the folks with the right knowledge, getting the right experience to do the best for us. And then, of course, we've got these specialized things that aren't listed as the DoD baseline that we have to have, such as SEI software architect, being a Scrum Master. Again, when I have my Agile teams, that Scrum Master really makes or breaks that team to make sure folks are on track, and my velocity of my Scrum team is going. And that's where that Scrum Master, it's not required by DoD, but we require it because it's important to us. It's important for us to make sure that our teams are on track. It's important to make sure that they're what we call a well-oiled machine, make sure that backlog is properly groomed, and that we're working on the right things for the right delivery for the next minimum viable product to be delivered. So there's a question there inside the attendee chat on are there a specific level required for the 8570? And the answer is yes. And that all depends on what position you're going to do within the Air Force. So depending on whether you're going to actually work as a system administrator, or whether you're going to be a system security manager, or whether you're going to be a senior developer, those all require different levels, and they require different certifications. So the answer is yes. The question is there an easy answer? And that is no. So that leads me into the next page here, where we're going to talk about training plans. So depending on what it is you do, might depend on what level we need you to be at, whether it be level 1, 2, and 3, or whether you need to be an information technician, a manager, or a software architect and engineer. So for most of our engineering group, we have pretty much 3 different job series that supports our software development. That's 855, 1550s, and 2210s. And those are engineers, computer scientists, and information assurance professionals. In order to support that, most of our folks are acquisition coded, which means they're part of the acquisition professional development program. And they've got to have some continuing education for acquisitions. So we have to know how to write SOWs, statements of work. We have to know how to participate in source selections. We got to know how to do deliveries and what the life cycle looks like for a project. So we require a set of continuing education training for those. And then if you have certifications, you also have to have what they call continuing education units or continuing education credits. And depending on who the governing body is for your IA certificate, that kind of dictates how many of those that you need for that. So I think right now for CSSLP, which is one of the ones by ISC squared, they require 40 hours a year. I believe that Security Plus probably requires about 50 for 3 years. So it all depends on what your governing body, what level of certification you have, is what you have to provide for those. But because we have these generic job series and these different CEU requirements, we've turned and migrated to a role-focused training. So if you're going to be our Scrum Master, if you're going to be the person who is going to be responsible for growing the backlog and keeping the team on track with developing the next minimum viable product, I've got a specific training plan for you. If you're going to be our stack engineer and make sure our pipeline is set up to do its automation through the Kubernetes stack, I've got a specific training role for you. So whether that be an 855, 1550, or 2210, whether you're an engineer, computer scientist, or an IA professional, if you're the right skill set to do this role, I've got some focused training plans for you. We realize that we can't just do it generically by job series. We realize we can't just do it for one size fits all, because a system administrator on a small system of 20 is very different than a sysadmin on a system of 100 or so endpoints or larger. So because we can't really say one size fits all, we had to get specific on our training. The last thing that we do on training plans is each year I usually try to get out some guidance on, if you haven't taken these courses yet, I'd like you to go get after these. So as you're looking at, hey, what CEU should I go take? Because a lot of them are open-ended. As long as you take a certain number, they give you credit. Well, which one should I go do? Well, I try to guide the organization, say, if you have to go do some, why don't you take these first? And then if you still have spare time, or if you've already taken them, go find something else. So if we'll get on these, this will help us shore up some of those CWEs we have and set us up for the next workload or the next evolution that we're going to have. So I try to put that guidance out about August, September for that next year. And here's a copy of the guidance that I put out for this year that we were trying to get after to shore up some of our gaps. We're about to embrace a lot of the Docker and Kubernetes for our deployments for our aircraft. A lot of you may have seen some articles out there today on F-16 on how they're embracing the Kubernetes and the cloud environment. And of course, a lot of our other products are heading that way as well. So we've got to start getting getting in some of those foundations to make that happen. So not only do we have to worry about the product that we're delivering, but I also got to worry about the environment. So that takes more than just an IT person that just looks at, hey, what do my logs look like? Well, it takes a little bit more than that. So because my environment can affect my product, my environment is almost just as important as the product that I'm delivering, because it has an impact on my ability to deliver a cyber resilient product. So the way we combat that is, one, we try to make sure we've got the right certified folks, and then we have some processes in place to go get after those development environments, because those are separate from production. I've got to have some additional tools that I wouldn't allow out in production that I've got to have in my development environment. And as such, it can generate some holes or gaps. And to get after those gaps, here's a list of some of the things that we do to get after that. A log is only as important as those that review it and action it. So just because I run a system or I run some sort of program that captures a log, if I don't actually go look at it, I'm not gaining anything from running that log. So I've got to take that and use that information, or correction, use that data to make it into information. So I need some sort of something like we use Logarithm and Splunk. Those are the two big ones that we use to take that data we're getting from log files and turn that into alerts and piece together the different things happening across the network to understand what's going on. I also got some cyber protection team audits. So when we have an event, hey, let's bring a team out, let them independently look at what are we doing? Are we doing the right things? Are we actually responding and understanding what we're seeing? So we've got lots of assets that we use to bring these things together. Another big one for us is software ingestion. So again, before I decide that I want to bring this software into my environment, how do I understand what risks that brings to me? Not everything is awesome, and just because it's on GitHub and person X uses it, doesn't mean it's going to work great for our environment. So here's a little slide that kind of indicates the things that we're doing to make sure that we make the right risk-based decision to ingest that software. Because once I put that software in my environment, I've now got to have my information assurance folks protected. I've got to have my developers be able to leverage it, and I got to make sure that when it delivers the product, it's not adding any type of vulnerability or a hole in my cyber resiliency plan. So I got to make sure I see where it's coming from. How often is this code maintenance? You know, what's the pedigree? Where does it come from? You know, who made it? Is it being updated? Again, a 5-year-old instance on GitHub is probably not the best code to have, because there's probably been a lot of updates that have come out in the past 5 years that now we have to update if we're going to go ahead and use it. And then I've got to be able to be compatible with everything else that it is we're doing. As I have some of these older software systems, like I said before, sometimes they use an older version of Java, or sometimes they use an older version of program X that just can't support that. So the last thing I'll say on this thing is library baggage. So make sure that when you decide to bring in a library, it does everything you want it to do and does nothing more. So if I'm going to bring in a cryptographic library, I'm going to bring in just the cryptographic functions I'm going to need for that program and throw the rest away. We are not going to take that whole package and package it with the product if we're not going to use it. We have no desire to have any dead code. We have no desire to have what we're calling library baggage, to say, hey, it does this one thing, but here's the other thing it could do if we call them. So that's another one of our key measures to make sure that what we ingest in and what we take is only what it is that we need. And that wraps up this approach for software assurance training. So I'll pause there because I need to go ahead and grab a drink, and I'll see if there's any questions.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. That was a very interesting presentation. And so I'm going to go. We've got some folks watching on YouTube, and we've got some questions that came in from that channel. So the first question was, how do you weave the risk management framework into your training curriculum? And have you modified it to fit into an agile software development type environment?
So the way that we weave in RMS or the risk management framework is that we make sure that we look at what controls are applied to the developer environment, and then what controls are applied to the actual code. So there are some key things inside of the RMS that are applied to the software development process, and we've got those added in there. So like I said earlier in the brief, we do have a group process we use for engineering to develop these products. And inside there, when we add in our software assurance tasks, we're also adding in some of those RMF requirements that we have to make sure that during our process, we've incorporated the RMF things to make sure that we're getting that authority to operate or that certificate in the field once the product is done. And then the other half of that then goes to our infrastructure folks who are looking at either the stack engineer or the enclave or environment we're doing to apply the rest of those controls to the environment while the engineer focuses on the product being delivered. Over.
Okay, thanks. So I'm kind of curious, how's the experience for you in trying to recruit and bring in new folks? I mean, given the competition with industry and kind of the unique niche you have, is that a challenge, or is that something you can use as a selling point? And so I'm just kind of curious what your experience is in that process.
Yeah, so if you look at the numbers, we're able to fill our ranks on what it is that we need. But if you look at the pay scale, for the same person with the same qualifications will probably make a little bit more inside the civilian field. But we offer those benefits that they don't. So not only do I offer them the ability to work on a DoD infrastructure, on a system that protects the freedoms of America, but it gives them the unique ability to solve and help the warfighter with his warfighting mission. So yes, on the surface you say, oh, well, I can go get paid more somewhere else, but it's the quality of life that we provide, it's the workload that we provide, it's the environment that we provide that keeps folks coming back to our organization and helping us fill our ranks. So we've really focused on doing some of the recruitment out of college, just like we have, your Boeings and Lockheeds and TIs. They're all out there doing their internships. We do them as well. Our internships just started this month in May. They'll run through the summer. I think this year we'll have over 100 interns. We're working for us at Tinker Air Force Base inside the software engineering group alone. So we're going to continue to recruit that way. And as you can see in the slides that we just did, we know we're getting those entry-level folks out of college, so we've designed our training plan to focus on these are the majority of folks that we're getting, so we have to get them up to the right technical level. Over.
And so with those folks that come in, so how do you evaluate their skill set? How do you identify those gaps? In the knowledge that they come into the organization with, but then, there's the holes that they have that you need to fill. So can you go into that process a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So when our employees come on, they have a small stint they do at the group level to get their initial onboarding. So all that initial onboarding training that I showed there a few slides back, they get that at the group level. And then we send them out to the actual workload they're going to work on. And then that Scrum Master and that team lead pairs them up through some paired programming and actually evaluates them for a few Scrum cycles. So as those Scrum cycles are going, they're getting feedback from their fellow employees. And then that supervisor takes that training plan that we have and starts marking off, hey, here's the things that a person knows, and then here's their gaps. And then they use that gap to give them a training plan specifically for them. So if that person needs, just a Pluralsight online training, that's awesome. If they need a boot camp or they need to have an in-depth face-to-face, we can get them that training as well. Or if they just need some more paired programming time to learn from a senior developer, we have that option too. So it's really on the supervisors out there to understand and know their folks and then find the right training for them. I'm always available, and if they have a specific situation, they'll give me a call and go, hey, this person needs this skill. I'm not sure where to get it from. Can you help me out? And I'll go find that thing and say, you know what, we can go get them this training on this type or come to a lunch and learn or, whatever the option is. That's how we get the specific training for those folks. Over.
And kind of following up on that, we got a question about so how does the funding for that extra training work? How does that work in your organization?
So we operate just like any other business, and we have a set of training funds we use for executing whatever training we need as an organization. So we look at what's available. We actually have some 2 to 3 years out where we plan out what kind of training that we have that's going to come up for those reoccurring things. Then we have a set of funds we use for those. Hey, I have a new requirement. I need to go get some training on this new technology X. So we have those. So we manage that just like any other business would. So if it's not already built into the Air Force, such as the Air Force Institute for Technology, or already on Fed VCE or somewhere else, we do have an opportunity to go get some additional training. Over.
Okay, thank you. So one of the attendees notes that it sounds like the developers have software assurance tools in their pipelines and environments, and that you also do independent software assurance testing. And she's just asking if you could, kind of explain how that process works.
Sure. So depending on what the in-state deliverable is what the pipeline looks like. So we've got this pipeline that runs through, and then our customer, whoever we're delivering it to, will have their set of requirements on what we need to do to validate it. I have only a limited number of folks right now that require an independent software assurance test from an outside unit, but the rest of them, usually because we're a system of systems, we give that delivery over to the Air Force Test Center, and the Air Force Test Center pulls those together as a system of systems and does an overall systems test. So I only have 2 projects right now within our organization that we do independent software testing by an external organization from that unit that does it. So I've got one flight at the group level that actually is my internal assessment software assurance team. And they will go out and do an assessment for those folks who either ask for it or are required to have it by the customer. We haven't built that capability up as large as we'd like to yet. But again, we're still building, and everything comes at a price. So we have to balance, how much testing we do versus how much capability that we deliver. So it's always a constant balance. Over.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So we've got some other questions from the audience here. So does each SWEG use the same set of slides, or do you have some uniqueness between each organization?
So we definitely do. When we put these slides together, we put them together for the software assurance community of practice, and that's where all 3 of us who are the organic software developers for the Air Force put this deck together. So each SWEG or each engineering group does have their own intricacies because we work on different sets of product lines. So you might have something a little bit different for our virtual fighters than you do for our unmanned aerial vehicles versus our satellites versus our bombers. So we do have some slightly different caveats here, but this is the overall approach. Over.
Okay, and same individuals asking what your experience is like getting the teams to adopt the software assurance efforts. Are you facing any pushback to the change, or you're getting full acceptance, or somewhere in between?
So as much as people like change in their pocket, they don't like to change their processes. So it is always a trying to give the what's in it for you. So part of that is my customer says I've got to have it, which makes it really easy and makes it part of the requirement. But for other folks, my customer hasn't asked for it because they expect it to be in there. So we are constantly trying to see what piece we need to upgrade or change to make the biggest difference. So one of the things that we've used in the past is the what they call the BSIM model, or Building Security and Maturity model, to identify, hey, what's my foundational thing I need to go attack next to improve, so that way my whole organization gets better. So we've done that for the past 4 to 5 years on identifying what we want to go improve or what we want to go fix. Over the past few years, we've really been focused on static analysis and a little bit of dynamic analysis. And now we're starting to branch out and starting looking at architecture analysis as well as fuzzying to try to make sure we're rounding out that software development lifecycle. Each project is a little bit different, so we've got to attack each one individually, especially because we don't all use the same tools. They're not all in the same programming language. So those are challenges. So that's why it's hard to get everybody all on the same sheet. But we are moving forward one day at a time. Over.
Okay, thank you. And so, given the current situation we all kind of find ourselves operating under, one of the individuals, one of the attendees is wondering if your tool sets are available to your team remotely via telework. Is that something that you can do out at your site?
So it depends on what the workload is. So some of our workload is being done on the cloud today. And because of the impact level it's done at, they can do that remotely from home. But a lot of our classified workload, we have not set up to do remotely yet. So for those folks, we have to be, on base inside of our classified areas to do that work. But we are moving closer to allowing our classified areas to be to do remote work. The technology is there. We've just been a little hesitant to adopt it for other reasons, but the technology is there, and I believe with the things that have happened over the past few months, we'll probably be moving some of those forward a lot faster than we thought we would. Over.
Okay, so I think we're pretty much here at the end of our scheduled time. So just kind of one quick question. You mentioned the Platform One, and I've been participating in some of the enterprise DevSecOps community of practice meetings, and during one of them they mentioned something called Thunder Camp, which I think is out in your area, and I was just wondering if that's something you or your group is involved in, and what that might be.
So it is actually. I'm actually the co-counselor of the Thunder Camp organization. So we are a offshoot of Platform One. So we are one of their satellite nodes, and we are bringing the technology of Platform One to the workloads that are at Tinker Air Force Base. So we're trying to use what Platform One's done today at the IL2, 4, 5, and 6 level, and bring those to fruition within the workloads at Tinker. So it's been a great experience working with those folks. They've got lots of great ideas and some innovation going on up there. They are really focused today on the new things coming out. So it's kind of up to Thunder Camp, us out here at Tinker, to adopt what they're doing for our current workloads. So it's definitely a challenge because most of our workloads were not designed or architected to use any sort of microservice. However, we are starting with making our environments convert to a microservice architecture as we engage all of our customers and product lines on how do we get them from their whatever technology they started with into some sort of microservice technology that's CNCF compliant. So it's a great experience. We love working with Platform One. We've got both a ski camp out there at Hill Air Force and Blue Sky out at Robbins Air Force Base in Georgia. But between the three of us, we're taking the Platform One goodness and getting into our acquisitions at our R3 bases. Over.
That's awesome. That sounds great. So, so Kurt, I want to thank you for a great presentation. It's very, very interesting, and I want to, wish you further success in the future. And
okay.
So, and I just
thanks for inviting me.
Okay, and I just like to mention our webinar for June. It will be on the 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and We're going to be looking at the new Rust programming language, and the webinar in particular will be on Rust error handling. And beginning in June, we're going to be releasing a couple of introductory podcasts looking at the Rust programming language. So we just wanted to give you a heads up. We've got that series coming out, and we will look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks for attending. Y'all have a great day. Stay safe. Bye-bye now.